Precision ammo can't shoot more accurately than the rifle it's being shot in. And a rifle can't shoot more accurately than the person that's shooting it. Well, today I hit the limit of my capability, and that's actually a good place to be. I said last time that today we would be starting the final load development for the 1885 Winchester here, chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor, and that we would be shooting at distance. But then I remembered there's one last thing we needed to do, and that's verify the results that we had during the preliminary load development. So I went to the range this morning to do just that. And before we go any further, let's take a look at the results we had from before and the results we had this morning and compare them for the same bullet and powder charge. And we're starting with the 130 grain ELD match and IMR 4350 powder. The top left target is from our range trip last week. The bottom right target is the same powder charge and bullet, but this is from this morning. And this is a shot for shot comparison. And I fired a 4-shot group this morning. Okay, I would say that repeated pretty well, right down to the third shot shifting slightly to the right. And remember that, because that's going to be important shortly. And the difference was this time we had a 4-shot group versus a 3-shot group, and our 4-shot group was over 100 thousandths smaller. So our group tightened up considerably. Well, one change I did make from the last time to today was today I used neck-sized brass. Yeah, I know that's no longer fashionable, neck size. Just about everybody's bumping the shoulder now. And there's some good reasons for that. Bumping the shoulder actually makes the case a little bit smaller, whereas neck sizing only affects the neck, and the case is a perfect fit for the chamber. Well, that makes it more prone to getting a stuck case when you're out in the field and a little dust in there or something. It can cause problems, or hunting. But for target shooting at the bench, I still prefer neck sizing. And generally I see results from that like what we just saw. Okay, now for the next group, and another change I made, by the way. Originally when we shot this load or tried this load and did our testing, I used percentages to determine my increments for my charges, powder charges. And for the powders we used for 6.5 Creedmoor, using a 5% increment from the max charge, that worked out to 0.4 of a grain powder difference between each charge. Well, today I cut that in half. So we're going in 0.2 grain increments. And for our next load that we're trying, I didn't have a group from last week to compare this to. So we're just going to look at just this group and what it did today. Okay, for our third group, and this is the one I'm really interested in, this powder charge and bullet combination last week, we had a 3-shot, 325 thousandths of an inch shot group. Right, so this is the one I want to verify, and this is the reason I went in 0.2 grain increments. I wanted to see exactly what was happening before we hit this powder charge and exactly what was happening afterwards. Okay, now let's take a look at it, and I've got to say, the very first shot, and we're starting with the first shot from this morning because we're going to throw it out. That was all me. I mean, I just butchered the shot. I wasn't on the rifle good, and it just broke when I wasn't expecting it. Now let's compare the next 3 to the 3 from last week. With those 3 shots right there, that's when I realized I've hit the limit of my shooting capabilities. Just bottom line. I noticed as the shot was breaking on all 3 of those, and I mean during that first initial impulse, I could see the crosshairs shifting to the right on the target. And I don't mean much, I'm talking fractions of an inch here, just ever so slightly. But as the shots were breaking on those 3, I would have bet money that all 3 of those shots were going to be an 1/8 to a quarter of an inch to the right. They were all right there together though. Well, what happened is I did it consistently for those 3 shots, so they all had the same point of impact. But if you look at the previous 2 shots and the next 2 shots that are coming up, that's where my variation's coming from, left and right. Okay, so for me to get better, I've got to work that out, which is fine. That's okay. I'm actually in a really good place here with this. I'm excited that my shooting's getting to a higher level of precision now. I hadn't been to this point in a while. Okay, so, and just being aware of it, I'm confident I will work it out. And even if I don't, I mean, we're talking fractions of an inch. But we're getting to the level now with the groups that we're shooting, sub half MOA groups, that to really dial this in, those are the little details right there that we've got to work out in order to get to that next level. Okay, now let's take a look at the next group. And this one's also 0.2 grain increment, and I don't have a group from last week to compare this one to, so we've just got the 4 shots from today. Now for our last group. And this is one of the powder charges last week where I was seeing a lot of vertical variation in the shot group. Okay, so this, when I went back today, I wanted to verify that really small 325 thousandths inch groups, if that was going to repeat. But I also wanted to fire this load here just to see if that vertical variation was going to repeat also. All right, so let's compare last week's to today and let's see. I guess the vertical variation that we were seeing last week's gone. Okay, now I've got a theory as to what might have been causing that, but I want to wait until I can verify that before I go speculating. Okay, and while I was there this morning, I also tried the 140 grain Sierra Match Kings with the IMR 4350, the very first load we tried in this rifle, and I wanted to see if neck size brass would shrink those groups down. And I saw improvements, but it still it isn't quite the load for this rifle. It just didn't want to go under half an MOA, whereas with the 130 grain bullet with the IMR 4350, 3 of our groups, our last 3 groups this morning, all of them were under half of an MOA. I think we found the bullet and powder combination for this rifle, and with that, the preliminary load development is done. That was such a good range trip this morning, and this is such an important topic here. The stuff I said to start with about the ammo can't be more accurate than the rifle can't be more accurate than the shooter. Okay, last week when I had all of that vertical variation from whatever, I had a lot of questions and comments from a lot of you on asking me, did I do this, or asking, if it was worth checking this. Great questions. Things like, did I sort my bullets by weight? Did I sort my brass by weight? Was it possibly seating depth? Okay. all of that stuff matters. That's why when you watch videos by the best shooters and the best reloaders, the competition guys, that's why they talk about that stuff. It matters. Makes a difference. But here's the thing, it doesn't make much of a difference. Okay, seating depth, great example. Seating depth, there is a debate as to whether seating depth even makes a difference on accuracy. Okay, so just the fact that the debate even exists should tell you if it does make a difference, it's not a big difference. Okay, and that's almost everybody that shoots and been reloading for a long time, almost everybody will say seating depth is something you use to really fine tune your load, but it doesn't make that big of a difference generally on your accuracy. Okay, and let's say it shrinks your group by 50 or 60 thousandths. Okay, that's measurable. That's making your group smaller. But remember what I said about what I had going on this morning about during that first initial recoil impulse, when the shot was just breaking, I could see my crosshairs moving ever so slightly. I'm getting 100, 200 thousandths variation from that. Well, I could go out and I could check seating depth right now, and I would never even know when I found the best seating depth. Okay, I've got too much variation going on from that to even be able to know if when I get the best seating depth, it's not going to show up because all the other variation I've got going on. Okay, and keep in mind also when those same, the top shooters out there that are shooting, they've got custom barrels, target barrels, hand lap barrels on the rifles and so forth. It's just an old factory barrel on this rifle. Okay, I don't know that this barrel will ever shoot at that level. I mean, anything's possible, but there's a reason they're using those custom hand lap barrels instead of just old off-the-shelf factory barrel. There's limits to what this can do. Okay, now as to what the limits are. Okay, well, that's why the preliminary that we just went through, low development, that's why it's so important. The preliminary is all about dialing in the major things. Okay, so finding the bullet and powder combination, that's a big one. Okay, and with all the testing we've done, I tried a lot of powders with that 140 grain Match King, and this rifle just wasn't liking it. But it really seemed to like that 130 grain ELDM with this powder. Okay, that's a big difference. And then the rifle itself. Okay, we fired, I guess, 140 rounds to this rifle so far. Okay, well, this bore should be about seasoned now, so it's starting to settle in and come into its own now. So we're fixing to start seeing the best performance from this rifle. And I'm starting, what I said about noticing that little bit of movement during that first recoil impulse. I'm really starting to step it up myself with my abilities. Okay, so the ammo, the rifle, and myself, we're all starting to hit on all three cylinders here. That's why all of a sudden we're consistently starting to see some sub-half MOA groups. Okay, now if I can get that worked out, that little bit of movement with me, and get this even down further on our shot groups consistently, okay, well then that's when we could start sorting bullets and sorting brass and doing the testing on length. Okay, but everything with shooting and reloading, there's a order of priorities. Matter of fact, I'm going to write down the order of priorities for the next video. I didn't even think about this till just now, but okay, we got to focus on the big things before we start worrying about those little ones. And the videos where the guys are explaining all that and the sorting bullets and brass and so forth, again, all that matters, but they don't mention that in the big scheme of things, there's a lot more important things we need to sort out first. Okay, so if we're shooting 3/4 inch groups, then we don't need to worry about link testing at that point. I mean, it's not going to make that much of a difference. We never get below half an MOA. A lot of that stuff not worth worrying about. Okay, now once we start getting down into that range, okay, that's when we can start focusing on those little bitty things to really tweak a load. Okay, well, that's your final load development, and that's what we're going to start on next.